Welcome to Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we're talking with Florian Berg, PhD. Florian is a research scientist at MIT Sloan, where he co-founded the Aggregate Confusion Project. His research covers sustainable investing, the disagreement between different rating agencies, and how it affects investors and firms. He received his PhD in economics from Paris Dauphine University, and Florian worked in the investment industry as a quantitative researcher at Amundi. So, Florian, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to start off with a topic that is near and dear to me because, as I told you when we first met, I worked at a bond rating agency called Fitch Ratings for years. So I was a little familiar with your research. So if we could start with your research on rating agencies, could you introduce what it is and what it told you?
Yeah, so I actually wrote my PhD 12 years ago about the correlation of financial performance and ESG performance. At that time, ESG was just really starting.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was working as a quant at Amundi Asset Manager and was responsible for a lot of research and those kind of strategies.
Yeah, and that firm really was a pioneer in the sector.
Yeah, we actually, at my time, we increased assets under management from 4 billion to 60 billion euros. And that was probably the whole worldwide market altogether.
That might have been it.
Yeah. So at this time, I went to a lot of conferences, actually the start of the UN PRI conferences. And a lot of people were using this ESG data, but everyone was complaining about it, that it was incomplete and no one really knows what it tells us. And so I actually then thought, when I met Roberto Rigobon from MIT Sloan and Julian Kolber, we all thought about taking a step back and not right away using this data, but really analyzing the data. So we contacted 6 different ESG raters and downloaded their data for their methodology PDFs. Not everyone had one.
Right. Yep.
So that was actually really complicated to just figure out what is actually in the data. And so we actually, we saw that there was a lot of aggregation on different levels because ESG ratings are an aggregation of up to 284 indicators and for Refinitiv and 38 for Moody's, for example. And so we were really confused in the beginning. And so hence the name Aggregate Confusion.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you said that. It's a great name.
And so then we came up with an algorithm to really disentangle the differences, because in the absence of knowing what the truth is of the true ESG performance, because we don't know that, we can't really compare those ESG ratings to the true ESG performance, but we can compare them to themselves and then figure out why they diverge. And we found actually that there are 3 main sources of divergence. The first one is measurement divergence. So if you want to measure the same attribute or indicator, such as diversity or climate change risks, you actually have different choices to make. Where do you get your data from? Is it disclosure? If you also look at media reports or at government data, and then you actually have to come up with a model in order to measure then really what actually the intention of a company is. Because if you just look at the gender pay gap or the CO2 emissions, it doesn't really tell you everything. What you want to know is, will the company actually reduce the CO2 emissions in the future? In terms of diversity, do they actually, how are historically disadvantaged groups are treated within this company? And the gender pay gap doesn't tell you everything. So you really have to you have to choose your proxy data, your proxies, and then you really have to choose your model, how to measure those indicators. And here we saw actually that this is the main source of divergence between ESG rating.
Is it mainly on measurement and or all 3 of those things? And is one of them more of a smoking gun, if you will? Is one of them more a source of divergence?
Yeah, so the other 2 actually is scope and weights divergence, which comes a little bit down to the definition of sustainability. So what do you actually assess? Do you assess diversity or not? Do you assess climate change risks? And if you do, what is the relative importance for each? Because in in the end, it's an aggregation, as we said, of those indicators to create the ESG rating. And aggregation here is just simply weighted averages. So and conditional on industries. So they're different. The weights are different between industries to take into account the differences between industries. And here, the smoking gun, so to say, would be the measurement, because it indicates that there's a lot of measurement noise, and it indicates that we don't really know how to measure those things.
The credit rating agencies tend to have very similar metrics. And I wonder if that helped you to build this model, or was this data so much different that it didn't really give you much to go on?
Actually, they're very different, even conceptually and philosophically, because credit risk ratings, they measure one single thing, and it's actually observable. So a bank or the loss associated to a default is observable over time. We have very few events, but there are events. So naturally, you can actually backtest and optimize your methodology. So that's why they should actually, over time, those credit risk ratings from different providers should converge. Whereas with ESG ratings, when you measure the gender pay gap today, and in 3 months, it might have changed, but probably the noise to signal ratio is constant. So you can't really backtest or optimize your ratings in that sense, your measurement practices. So the only way you can do that is to create better measurement methodologies. And here, this is, it's more the confidence that you have in there than actually really knowing that this is actually the truth. Does it mean we shouldn't measure that because we never really know it's the truth or not? No, we should still measure because there is some signal. We show in our research actually that there is signal in the noise. But we also show that we need to make more progress, and we will over time. And by we will, I mean the whole industry will.
Right. Everybody.
Yeah.
So looking forward, where do you think those areas of progress are going to come and improvement are going to come? I recognize that one of the things that you get from signal analysis is over the long term, basically historical data that helps you determine whether you're looking at the right signal and what the noise is. And that's true also in terms of what ratings are. Is over time, they have time series data. So other than time, which we can all, where are the points of improvement in this type of data?
I think there are 2 points, and it's both transparency. So first of all, better firm level disclosure. And this is data we should standardize. So I'm talking here about SASB and GRI and sustainability reports. I think here the measurement should be standardized. But then the ESG ratings, it's the interpretation of this raw data. And it's more a sort of opinion that those ESG raters give. And here the problem is that often we cannot follow how they actually came from the raw data and formed their opinion about this raw data. So I think this step needs also some more transparency. And in my talks with regulators, I recommend that we actually force those ESG raters to be more transparent about their measurement methodologies. There are 1-2 actors that actually do a good job in terms of transparency, but others don't. And as I jokingly said in the beginning, some had PDFs, methodology PDFs, some others didn't. And that is the problem, right? So I didn't even know I couldn't even figure out what was in the data. Luckily, a lot of those ESG raters gave us access to the analysts, and we could discuss what actually is in those indicators. But yeah, this takes a lot of time, and not everyone can do it. So not everyone will be able to criticize those ESG rating agencies productively and constructively.
Are there other ways to motivate that type of transparency other than regulators, say asset owners? Could they do it?
Yeah, I think so. I think all the stakeholders should put pressure on ESG raters to be more transparent about the measurement methodologies. And the way you do it would be as a firm, you ask them how they come up with the measurement with this ESG rating or with a certain indicator. As an asset owner, you can also ask and criticize it when you think they are actually wrong, or you see a huge divergence between one rater and another for a given firm. And we as academics, we would like to be able to do that more, but often for us, the pressure is not easily to be applied because we often get even the data for free or very cheap.
Right.
So they won't really listen to us. So we need the PDFs, so then the presentations or the documentation.
Right. Interesting. So over the time that you've been doing this research, do you think the transparency has improved? Do you think the divergence has narrowed?
The transparency certainly is better, much better. I think it's also because the market in general is maturing.
Do you think the divergence is narrowing?
The divergence is narrowing. I haven't seen it yet. We are writing an update paper at the moment about the divergence over time with a new set of raters, but we haven't really observed that. And I think there is also a reason for it, because as I said, there are two parts to the divergence. There's this definition of sustainability, how you define it, and that obviously depends on different cultures. It will be different in the US than compared to Europe or Asia. And on the other hand, measurement. Here, I think each rater is getting more and more sophisticated about the measurement methodologies and also the data collection. But interestingly, we haven't seen an improvement or a convergence over time. We are still investigating that, and whenever I have some results, I will keep you updated.
The divergence obviously creates some issues for investors, but it may also create some opportunities like anything does. So could you talk a little bit about what that means around the industry, please?
Yeah, so we actually wrote a paper about exactly that, about how to leverage this divergence to improve the signal of the data. And the way you could see that is you learned in high school that simply taking an average of a certain set of ESG ratings, for example, will improve the signal to noise ratio because errors cancel each other out. But here the problem with ESG ratings is that they have different levels of noise. So an average is not really optimal. But there's some other statistical ways of actually using that and really getting some sort of getting a better signal out of those ESG ratings. And by doing that, you leverage actually that all those raters have different approaches. Some only look at firm disclosed data. Others actually impute also data and then put a lot of emphasis on controversies in the media, other more on government reports. And so all those different assessments you can actually leverage and then extract a signal out of those all ratings. And we really show that actually the correlation between financial performance and ESG performance goes up if you do so, and by a factor of 2.6.
Oh, wow, a lot.
Yeah, that is actually a lot. We were really surprised that it was that big. And so that is one point. The other thing is that we actually do see in another paper, we actually saw that we analyzed if ESG rating changes of the 5-6 biggest ESG data providers have an impact on the financial markets. And we see actually here, and we only so far have done the analysis in the US, but not yet in Europe, because it was more difficult to get the data for Europe. But now we have it and we're working on it. And in the US, we see actually that it's almost only MSCI that really triggers mutual fund change holdings.
Right.
So the other raters are not that big. And anecdotally, it seems to be true. When you, for example, look at the market share of MSCI by backing out the revenue, then you see that MSCI is fairly dominant in the US. In Europe, this is obviously completely different. So that's why we're really excited to do the analysis also in Europe.
I wonder, when you're doing this analysis and you compare the US to the EU, one of the things that strikes me very much is that a lot of the changes in the EU have come from the top down. They've been regulatory oriented. Some of the changes in the US for companies have been based on sort of bottom up, if you will, from the consumer. Do you think that makes a difference in in how you get to it? It does not really matter which direction it came from.
That is a great question. Yeah, it might be it's really hard to see because I can't really answer that because it would be only assumptions. It is definitely a good research questions, but it would be only assumptions, and they could go both ways. For example, you could think that if it's regulatory, then people would try to use more compliance. But you can also then the counter argument that you might have more greenwashing in the US because they don't really believe in it, right? And they just do it for the clients. So it's really hard to. It's a great question. It's a really good question, and I think it needs a research before I can.
Right. I thought about that as I was asking it, that this one might be your next paper. Yeah. Well, the other thing that I am exceptionally interested in is how where things go next. The difficulties with the data are getting nearer the end now. Are we coming down to a place where the data is in good enough place for the investors to be comfortable with it? Or do we still have a long way to go and it requires a lot more?
No, I think we still have a long way to go. So we show in this paper where I talked about the signal to noise. The signal to noise ratio is 30-40%. So most of it is noise, we found. And I think that doesn't mean we should use it again. But I think there is still a lot of work to be done to improve the measurements. We are getting better and better at having disclosure frameworks such as GRI, SASB, and now soon ISSB. So I think, and that will also be part of regulation. So I think this side is getting better and better. But then the ESG raters, they give an opinion, right? And then you really need to, this interpretation of data is not trivial at all, because when you look at the gender pay gap or the CO2 emissions, you want to actually know the intentionality and what's really going on behind the line, behind the curtain, right? In a firm. What do they actually really want to do? Do they really want to decrease CO2 emissions? Do they do enough? Because if you just compare CO2 emissions, the headline numbers or carbon intensity, it doesn't really tell you what they truly believe. And to measure this is almost, it's really hard. So I think we need better practices, but we are still in a revolution. Just look at, for example, ChatGPT a couple of months ago. That changed a lot, especially in education, because we had a lot of mails internally going on at MIT, and it's like, oh, what can we ask the students to do? What kind of homework can we ask them to do? It was a massive shock, right? And all this data and everything will actually lead to more innovations that we cannot really foresee right now, and they might come sooner or later. And I think that will improve measurement practices for sure in the future.
Well, ChatGPT is going on to a lot of other places too outside of academia. In my spare time, I work with one non-profit organization. It's a relatively small company. It doesn't have a marketing arm. And we need to do a press release. And they said, well, can anyone write a good press release? And I said, no, I cannot, but I know how to do it. and it was great. I mean, that thing is a machine. It's awesome. You just add a couple of basically Python commands to it.
Yeah. I use it often now for work. For example, I wanted to analyze some sustainability reports, and I needed a trainings data set. And for that, ChatGPT was amazing. It reduced the time by 50, by 100 or so.
Wow.
Create a really, really great start of a trainings data set. So there are certain things it's really good for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't write the whole thing for me, but it certainly cut probably 30% of the time out of it for me. So yeah, it definitely helps. So, all right. So Florian, perhaps we should leave it there on the revolutionary thought. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Rob, for having me.
And to the members who are listening, if you are interested in hearing more of what Florian had to say, you can watch one of our videos from 2 months ago when Florian was a moderator at our annual ESG conference. Until next time, I'm Rob Rowan, and this has been Compound Insights.